Yeah, man, it's the 30th of July, 2023. Let's talk about Android Green. All right, and gang stalking and how they're using different things. So I want to explain a few things to you guys, and it's just stuff that I've noticed from personal experience, but I've had a lot of problems with Android over the years, and especially problems with Android. But it doesn't mean that you're immune to gang stalker infiltration of your devices if you have iPhones, because I also deal with that all the time. And talk about a few things. One, for example, I have two iPhones, and that's what I use. I use two iPhones, and they both have their own service and their own number, and I use two iPhones, but typically I use one. Okay, I'm mostly on one. I have a second one and I use it sometimes, but a lot of times I'll turn it off just because I know they're using it and I don't want to give them extra resources. But it's set up in a way that I like to use the both of them, okay, all the time. But it's kind of a hindrance when you have people infiltrating your devices, and especially when they're using it against you. For example, like running their live streams, and you're basically giving them service and a platform and a physical device to latch onto with their broadcast and remote neural monitoring stuff to be able to use that to, so you're basically hosting them to gang stalk you. And they can gang stalk you anyway, but it's a lot less convenient if they don't have your hardware and your services and all of that to be able to use. That said, you can't really let them hinder you from using your stuff. You still need to be able to use your stuff, and you don't want to be at a disadvantage going around trying to be like off the grid or whatever, and you can't even use your own devices. And I've tried that too. Okay, but one thing that I noticed, okay, obviously you guys probably know that Android is green. The messages come through as green. If you have an iPhone and somebody messages you, if they're on an iPhone, it comes through blue. If they're on an Android, it comes through green. And you've probably all seen this. If you haven't, pay attention. If you have an iPhone and when somebody messages you and it's blue, that means they're on an iPhone. And if they message you and it's green, it means they're on an Android. And I mean, I don't know really what, if they're on a Nokia or a Windows phone. It's not very typical or common, and nobody has those, so I don't know. But Androids come through green. And what happens with me is I'm always messaging myself because I want to be able to have information, especially when I consider it evidence, in multiple places, and I'll message stuff to myself all the time, and sometimes it's just like reminders and stuff. I just kind of use it in that way. So I might pick up this device and just message this other device, and I get messages back and forth. Well, say I'm not using the second phone all day, and suddenly I want to message myself something, and I'll do that, and then and it's green. Now, why is that? Why would my iPhone to iPhone messages come through green? And that brings us to the virtual device, the virtual machine. All right. So, although I have an iPhone here, it's an iPhone, but if a gang stalker is using my hardware and using my services to run a virtual machine, and that virtual machine happens to be Android, which they can do, they can definitely 100% do that. And I've witnessed that firsthand, and I know it to be a fact. And do some research on it if you don't believe me. But when they start using virtual machines, stuff gets crossed up. Stuff gets crossed up, and it's like accidental or out of their hands. Stuff gets crossed up. So when I message myself from iPhone to iPhone and it comes through green, I know that they're using virtual machine, which is Android. You can have a virtual iPhone, but in this case, it's an Android, and they basically have my device taken over, and they're stealing my services and hosting it all on my hardware and using my service. And typically, I'll take a quick screenshot of that and then message myself with it, and maybe just to have the evidence of it happening, and they'll log out or eject, whatever you want to call it, and suddenly my messages will be blue again. But I get weird stuff like that because they're using my devices. And back in the day, I knew somebody that was learning to be a gang stalker, somebody that was getting their neural monitoring, and probably should have gave it to me too back before I even was being gang stalked. And I didn't understand because this person wasn't a computer person. And then later, it turns out that they had basically joined up with this group of gang stalkers, some of the same gang stalkers that I still deal with today. And when they were doing all of that, suddenly not even being a computer person, never even had a computer, and smartphones were just starting to be a thing. Suddenly they had to have a jailbroke iPhone. Suddenly they had a virtual Android on their iPad. Suddenly they had a hosting package. Suddenly they were putting in all this weird stuff in the browser, like to basically log into somebody's local host to have like a secure connection. And I didn't completely understand it all at the time, but later, as all of this stuff started transpiring, it made sense to me, and I understood why they did that. They were using virtual machines, virtual Androids on their Apple devices, and they had them stored in a online with hosting, and they could just log in to their virtual machine, which was hosted online, and then operate as if they were on a completely separate device. And that's how it works with virtual machines. And you can also have virtual machines that are hosted right on your device, which in a lot of our cases we do. We have gang stalkers that host their virtual machines on our devices. And that's just another reason you need to learn a lot about computer stuff, mobile app stuff, web development stuff, coding, network protocol stuff, cybersecurity. Every aspect of it is what you need to be learning. Another time, I had a situation where somebody kept calling me, and they were calling me from their phone, but it wasn't coming up as their phone number. And at the time, I was accusing them of using some kind of, I was like, what are you doing? Calling me from like a secret Google Voice number or something? And I'm aware that you can use Google Voice or different like text apps to have a different number. But I was close with this person, and I was trying to figure it out, and they were saying, oh no, I promise, there's none of that. And so I was around them one day, and I called that other number that kept coming up, and it made their phone ring. And I said, see, now you're lying. Later, again, I would find out that this is a gang stalker that was using a virtual machine and hiding remote neural monitoring stuff on the virtual machine. So you could go in a gang stalker's phone and search around all day. If you don't know how to find the hidden virtual machine or log into their virtual machine wherever it's hosted online, then you're not going to find anything to do with remote neural monitoring. It's all hidden like that. That's how they hide the stuff. They use virtual machines. It's a big deal in gang stalking. It's almost like a necessity. Like if you're going to use remote neural monitoring and do sketchy, illegal, penetrating other people's devices, all of these categories, you're going to need to be using a virtual machine rather than like your solid phone hardware that is linked directly back to you. And this is how they do it. But later I would find out that person also had the virtual machine, and they were doing remote neural monitoring stuff, and that's what was going on in that situation too. They had, and it was coming up at different. So if you have different numbers coming up, like if somebody calls you, that's not their number, but they're using their phone. That's suspect. That's real suspect, because it can be a text app or a Google Voice or something like that, but it is also very much a possibility that it is their virtual machine. And like I said, things get crossed up when it comes to virtual machines and hosting them on especially phones, because phones are not exactly open to be able to do crazy things like that. Like you have to know what you're doing or have jailbreaks or you have to be a little bit more advanced to be able to do things like that as things get crossed up, and it's not perfect. The things that they're doing is not perfect. I use virtual machines on my MacBook. I can run Linux, and sometimes I can run. I have Windows also, Windows 11 on there, and I can run my MacBook as regular Apple MacBook, or I can run it as a Linux machine with I got Kali on there, or I can run Windows 11 on there. And I wanted to learn about Linux, so that's why I put that on there, and I haven't really messed with it enough. But I should be messing with it more. But I do what I can when I have time and as it comes. But the Windows, I needed to use that because there was I forget which was like the whatever's their it's in Office, whatever their database thing is, and I forget what it's called, but it's the one part of Office that doesn't work on Mac, and I had to use it for one of my classes, and so I had to run it on a virtual machine on Windows. But that's way different. I get VirtualBox, and I can get the operating systems and set up everything, and maybe it's way different. Actually, it's probably not that different, but it's something that's more user-friendly to be able to operate and set up on a laptop. If you're doing it on a phone, you can't, it's hard to even get into an iPhone in the first place. So you'd have to figure out how to jailbreak your stuff and figure out how to get a virtual machine on it. And then, all of these are things that people that I know that are 100% gang stalkers, this is like a process that they were learning this stuff as they were becoming somebody that could hide remote neural monitoring and be able to have access to other people's neural monitoring and control their own stuff and keep it all out of reach from anybody who would possibly get a hold of their devices or accuse them of something or anything like that. So, but the virtual machines is, I believe, 100% why half the time my messages will come through green like I'm on an Android when I'm using my own two iPhones. Both originally bought by me, both on my actual service plan, and it should come through blue all the time, iPhone to iPhone, if I message myself, and sometimes it comes through green. And when it does, I'm fairly certain that there's a virtual Android being operated on my device at that time, and that's why it comes through that way. And this is one of the things where stuff gets crossed up. And anyway, I'm gonna get some sleep. It's late at night, and I wanted to put that out there while I was thinking about it, because I've been meaning to talk about this, and I'll talk about it more as I learn more, and the more stuff that I learn with all of my classes, and when I really start to be able to explain this stuff in depth and give you information that can help you with your devices and all of this stuff, I will be doing that. And I would suggest that you also start to study computer science in general, because it's probably the best route we can take to defeat gang stalking and to become untargetable. All right, thanks for watching.